really, you don't really, you don't know jack shit about professional wrestling unless you've been in it for a long time, really, especially like I said, anything 10, 15 years, um, yeah, anything under 10, 15 years from this day to day, to me, it's really, it was all cakewalk. I think I really believe it, and I think because back in the day, we used to get beaten, cut, bruised. You had to, and you had to keep coming back and coming back and coming back, and the wrestling schools were different. I mean, it was like. They weren't just trying to bring bodies in and more money, more money, more money. I mean, they would really test you. And if you'd come back and come back and come back and come back, then you were given, a chance and respect. So it's, believe me, it's changed. And I look at it from a business and from a wrestler's point of view. When a guy deserves to be there, and I don't care if he's 100 years old, but if he's over, he's over. Just get over it.
It's amazing. It's like you can read my thoughts, because that was going to be a question I wanted to ask you. It's like, how would you compare the wrestling business from when you first started to the way the business is today?
Well, you've tasted apples and then you've tasted oranges. So now it's a matter of which of the two you prefer. And it's like, it's apples and oranges. It's like two planets, and that there are other planets, in this very universe. There's some that you can't see. So that's pretty much the way it is. It's another planet. It's apples and oranges. It's like salt and sugar. How can I compare it? I think it's become just so disrespected, exposed. It just amazes me, what I see out there, and it amazes me that a lot of these young people, they're not willing to learn. It's all become like, the more movies we watch, these shitty movies like that Matrix crap and all that stuff where they're flipping and flopping all over the place. The stuff that is completely unrealistic, and then you have good athletes trying to perform that. It has nothing to do with a professional wrestling, and these are the same guys that could never lock up with Harley Race or Steve Kerr or Arn Anderson or some some of the true legends. I mean, they couldn't hang with Bob Backlund for 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Especially out in the indies, where they have all this time to practice a match, because they work like a couple of times a month, and they practice the same match, and they do the whole flip flop thing, and then the fans, they become readjusted to something like that. But then again, what gives me the breath of fresh air is when I see that when there's a good match, a good wrestling match, a solid wrestling match, and then there are a lot of fans that are like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen that in a while. That's really cool, that type of a thing. And I'm not talking about being lazy and a headlock takedown and, staying there forever. I'm talking about professional wrestling, bro. I'm not talking about flipping and flopping, something that's completely unrealistic, and it's a whole different thing. I could go. You would have to have 24 hours available for me to go on about that, and to tell you, some of the horrid things that I see out there in the scene, some of the disrespect and the horrid scenes, and the way that they behave in the locker rooms, and the way that they just act the way, disrespectful, and, take your chair and not shake your hand, and, smoke cigarettes, pass wind, act like a bunch of idiots, and then they talk about their matches like it's this, like it's the birth of their own child, and it's the fact is that a lot of the kids, they're just big marks for themselves, and that ruins the business.
Jason, it was over a month ago over at the Pro Wrestling Syndicate Supercard show out of New Jersey, where we saw former ECW original New Jack wrestle his very last match in his career against CZW's Necro Butcher. What are your thoughts and your reactions to the official retirement of New Jack from the wrestling industry?
Well, I'm very sad by it because New Jack is one of the guys that I got along with, probably the best in the ECW. I mean, we were on the road together and hung out together. We were in some horrid bar fights together too. And yeah, we've gone through all that, and never took any shit from anyone. Always had our, I mean, wherever we were, we ended up in some places where we literally pretty much World War III our way out of there, and so there's a lot of respect, and I think that he's a very unique individual because of his style, and what he brought in, and he kind of brought in that less is more type of a thing, and he brought that street fight value, and which was there before, but he took it to another level. And obviously, a lot of kids these days, they think they're mini New Jacks or whatever, and that'll never be. So for me, if he decided to retire, he did it for his own reasons, and I wasn't there. I didn't see it, but I'm sure that if it was him and Necro Butcher, they probably tore the house down, and I'm sure it was something I'd like to see on a DVD one of these days. I think that, and especially he's like in best shape of his life. He's training hard, watching what he eats and all that type of thing. But he's got his own reasons, and I respect that. And I think that the day that New Jack retired, professional wrestling lost quite a superstar.
Actually, I have a question. There's a little bit of changing gears. There's a new documentary that's coming out that has to do with the ECW. It's called Barbed Wire City. And it's out in your area, out in New Jersey. What do you think? I'm sorry, Philadelphia. What do you think about this documentary? And has they even possibly talked to you about being a part of this documentary?
I have no clue. This is like, I think someone wrote to me something about it. I never even knew what it's about. And I mean, I think, in my own humble opinion, I think that, being one of the ECW originals, I was there in 1993 for the Ultra Clash in the fall of 1993 at the ECW Arena when Paul Heyman, the original Extreme dude, took over. And I think it would be very nice if someone would call me to be there and do that. But I'm not sure, I don't know. This is like to say, I didn't even know what it was, but now you're telling me it's a documentary about ECW. No, I would love to, definitely like to be a part of it, But then again, I would have loved to have been a part of the TNA ECW thing, and it didn't happen, and, it just disappointed me, and, left sort of like a bitter pill, with me, and I hope this is not another one that'll do the same, because I truly believe that I should be a part of something like that, because I was there from the very beginning. I was there when we were making next to nothing or nothing. I was there when we were working only a day or two a month, before the whole thing took over. And quite frankly, I was there way before a lot of the guys came in and they were working every weekend, and making money. And I mean, and if you look at the ECW originals, you got the originals, I mean, like back in the day, you got guys like the Rockin' Rebel, right? And, Hot Body and Stetson, and, Petrucci and his partner, and, guys like that, and, Tommy Cairo, and, there are a lot of people that should, ECW did not just, take over after, the mid '90s. If we're talking, there were guys there way before me, guys and girls like, Angel Amoroso and Tigra and, all these different girls, Sandman and Peaches and, I mean, it's not just, after the birth of, let's say, Rob Van Dam or whomever, you know what I mean? Or Too Cold Scorpio or, and nothing against those guys, but I'm just saying, ECW goes way back. And if you're really going to paint a true picture of ECW isn't, Extreme Championship Wrestling, you need to go back to at least a little bit before when it was Eastern Championship Wrestling. How about Todd Gordon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on, people, here we go. How about JT Smith? I mean, all the guys that were there that made that company, and then unfortunately, they were forgotten, and it's a crying shame.
I kind of remember JT Smith kind of having a gimmick calling himself an Italian stallion.
No, that was like later on. But JT Smith, used to come out to he had so he was really the original ECW guy that would jump off the eagle's nest and do all that. I mean, he was the guy that would do anything. Just absolutely tough as a $2 steak and. One of the nicest guys, a hell of a look, always in shape, big dude. He could wrestle, he could do it all, and one of the best guys. I mean, there were a lot of guys back then. Even guys like Donnie Allen, who gave it everything. I mean, he would come in and do whatever. He could manage, he could wrestle. He would take a bump for anyone. Just a very, very humble guy. Someone that really. There are a lot of people who deserve to be credited for Extreme Championship Wrestling, even if they were not there when Extreme Championship Wrestling evolutionized, because they were there, during the ECW, the Eastern time, and there were, let's put it this way, there are so many that paved the way for me to come in 1993, like Hunter Q. Robbins III, who was the manager before me, and other people like I said, Stetson Hotbody, and it's almost like I know all these names and I'm, the guys and the girls, they were all tough as nails, and they could go, like I said, I always remember these people that paved the way for me because they were there before I was. I was elsewhere. I did my WCW thing and WWE, WWF, and went overseas and did all these other indies. But 1993, I mean, I am an original, but they're the originals. They're even more veterans to that company than I am.
I got a question for you. ECW back in the day was really known for having hardcore, smash mouth, violent type of matches. What would be some of the few matches that you've seen in your tenure in ECW that really like stick out in your mind to this day as being like one of the most brutal things you've ever seen?
Well, I think that one of the most brutal things that I've ever seen was Mike Awesome wrestling JT Smith. The late Mike Awesome, who was one of the greatest ever. I mean, we'd need a whole other chapter, just for that guy alone, because, he deserved 100 times more than what he got in the business. When he power bombed, and, we're talking that like almost like that Razor's Edge type power bomb, running power bomb. Mm-hmm. He did that to JT Smith, ran from one side of the ring to the other, over the top rope, and threw him out. No, I'm sorry. No, that wasn't it. When he did the leaping dive over the top rope onto JT's